Thank you so much. I have the pleasure now to welcome on stage one of our sponsors at the event this year, Sofia Tamarello, Senior Consultant at Cometric, who will speak about cognitive bias and how AI can help with detecting, and he will tell us more about that. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, perfect. How is everyone doing this morning? Yeah? Some nervous energy in the room? Okay, lovely. Let's see, our slides are up. Great. So, as we know, for the past 18 months or so, everyone has been talking about AI. And as comms professionals, analysts, and researchers, we try to incorporate it in our workflow. At this event today, there are numerous sessions on AI. One of them from my esteemed colleague Maya, coming up later on. I really look forward to attending as many sessions as possible. There is, though, a very important aspect of AI that we haven't paid enough attention to, and this is cognitive bias. And this exists both in the analysis process and AI utilization. AI, of course, is a fantastic tool. It can help us with making tasks simpler. It can help us with bringing cost efficiencies to the fore. And for years at Cometric, humans and AI have been working in an integrated way. However, if we are new to AI, it's very important to understand that as we humans are, so AI is flawed as well, with certain limitations. Before we deep dive into cognitive bias in the analysis process and AI, I want to make a note that this is going to be an interactive session, so please jump in and share thoughts and questions as we go through. So, what is cognitive bias generally? A lot of us have this opinion that our perception and our opinions are the results of years of rational and objective analysis. However, the truth is that our opinions are the results of years of paying attention to the information that confirmed what we believed without being able to challenge ourselves for these preconceived notions. Therefore, in a nutshell, cognitive bias is a preconceived notion or preference. It's when we make quick assessments of what's normal based on past information and social and cultural influences, and it can influence how we evaluate facts and situations. So, let's try and think about AI now. At the root of machine learning, we have the actual data, the very well-known training data set, and this is the issue that we start with. And of course, the way we label our data can lead to faulty judgments, which are effectively cognitive biases. So let's test ourselves a little bit and see if we are indeed biased. When you guys are looking at this slide, can you notice anything at all, anything that jumps out for any of you? Alan knows it probably. Yes. So the main principle here is that we tend to perceive what we expect to perceive. So it's very difficult to change our minds even when we are exposed to challenging and different information. So just to give you an example, a lot of times when we are analyzing data, we work for a client for a very long time, And we know the sort of key elements and the key issues that come up regularly for that sector, for that client. So my question to you is, and food for thought, when something comes up that contradicts our general assumptions for that certain client, do we tend to highlight this in our narrative, or do we just disregard it because it doesn't really fit with our preconception with regards to that specific client or that specific sector? And the key question is, do we even notice this contradictory piece of information in the first place? We're going to move to another puzzle in a second. Just before we do, can I ask this side of the room, so these two rows, to start looking at the sequence we're going to see from the right-hand side, yes, and this side from the left, and see what we're going to notice or not. Let's take a minute here. Any takers? Any thoughts? Yes. Okay. So, and probably some of you think differently or not? Okay. So the key point with this experiment, with this exercise, is that if we look at the drawing in the middle, in isolation, we have equal chances of viewing it as either a man or a woman. But because each of you started looking at the sequence from two different sides, your perception of this initial exposure to the drawing will continue for long after this neutral or objective drawing in the middle. Does this make sense? Excellent. So the key takeaway here is that impressions resist change. I was at a conference that focused on pharma clients, pharma comms professionals a couple of months ago, and a comms director was saying that they ran an exercise internally whereby a few team members were exposed to AI-generated images that were fake, and even after they were told that they were fake, they wouldn't change their minds. They couldn't challenge themselves and change their opinions. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Let's go to the next and final puzzle. By show of hands, who of you can see an old lady in this drawing? Okay, and who can see a young lady in the drawing? Okay, how incredible is this? We are all looking at the same thing, and yet we are seeing different things, right? Spend a couple of seconds to notice both the young and the old woman. Can everyone see both now? Yes? Okay. So can you mentally start to shift between the two? And if so, do you notice an initial resistance and difficulty in doing so, to shift between the two? Yes, I see heads nodding. Great. Okay. So the main principle here that it's difficult to see the same information from different perspectives, and yet this is what we are asked to do on a daily basis as comms professionals, as analysts, as researchers. So it's very important when we are dealing with data to be able to cut and slice it, so we can look at it from different perspectives and try to mitigate bias as much as possible. Let's move on. No more puzzles for you, so you should be pleased. Let's look into bias in the analysis, measurement, and AI utilization a bit closer. Now that we have tested ourselves, one of the key things I want to mention is that the circumstances under which accurate perception is most challenging is when we deal with data. And as I said, we do this on a daily basis. And not only the analysis process is very, very difficult, but now we have to deal with an extra variable, that of AI. A research paper published in 2018 corroborated the idea that computer algorithms reflect the values of their creators, and this is one of the first things I mentioned in my presentation today. For instance, women were described more often as girls in order to make them sound weak or dependent, and this happened a lot more often in comparison to men being described as boys. Or women's occupations were often modified by their gender. So, for example, we had female lawyers. It's very important, therefore, to keep in mind that if we are labeling a very subjective data set in the morning before coffee and then after coffee, we will probably label it in a different way. It's very important, therefore, to ask ourselves certain questions when we're dealing with data. What sources inform our insights? Again, I was shared this example at this pharma conference a couple of months ago. There was this comms director, and they were having a debate with her daughter about the Pfizer vaccine and if the daughter should have it or not. She was really against it, but then one day she came back from school having been vaccinated. And so when the mother, that comms director, asked her, okay, so what made you change your mind? The lady, the teenager said, oh, don't you know it's all over TikTok, the Pfizer vaccine can give you bigger boobs. So it's very important to understand the sources that we are consuming, to use different sources, be that in the analysis process or when we are using AI. Ask AI, if you're giving me an answer, where did you find these sources? What sources did you use? Also, are we mindful of evidence gaps or our own reasoning? Do we vary our questioning? I'm very confident that if we're looking at the same topic, each one of us will ask AI a question in a different way. None of us will ask the exact same question in the exact same way. Have we sought diverse perspectives on questions? So if you have something in mind, just go to a colleague, talk it out with them, see, maybe they have a different perspective. Don't just rely on your own rationale. Are we using a checklist before we start our analysis? So if you have 5 or 10 hypotheses, and all of them are confirmed at the end of your research, be that in the analysis process or when you're using AI, you are probably, you probably have to flag this because it's very possible it's confirmation bias. So don't just confirm your hypothesis, challenge yourself. Okay, so let's look into a few techniques that can help us mitigate bias, both in the analysis process and AI utilization. We can start with Team A versus Team B. This is when we divide a bigger group into 2 smaller groups, and we have Team A argue one thing and Team B argue something else. Internally, we had this very recently. We wanted to bring pricing down for a client, and we used 2 different models to do so. And therefore, we had more than one options, and we made sure we used the best one for the client. Devil's advocacy, this is probably something you have heard of before. Bear in mind, it's when we challenge someone's point of view by offering a solid alternative argument or solution. Very recently, again, at Cometric, we wanted to include social media for a specific client, but the results were really bad. The data was not clean at all. So we had to play devil's advocate and really understand that actually it's not ideal to use automation all the time to find the best solution. And the human aspect is indeed very important. What if analysis? This is when we test alternative hypotheses, and usually they tend to be not very reasonable or not very possible. And an example that comes to mind is when a client came to us with a very general question about the topics that are being discussed for a certain issue. It was very general. We thought using automation was impossible, but actually we managed to do so. And brainstorming, of course, this is something you probably do quite regularly without even realizing. We had a client recently who came to us with a request that had to be turned around in 48 hours. And we were looking at 17,000 articles that needed to be coded. And of course, that would be impossible. So what we did, we brought several teams together. We used our media analysts to code a sample of 500 articles, and then we used this sample with our NLP team who trained the machine, and the whole data set of 17,000 articles was indeed coded in an hour. So that was great. Any questions so far, or any thoughts? Nervous energy, okay. Okay, just a few more things to consider in terms of mitigating bias. It's very important to understand the capabilities of AI and our own capabilities as humans as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, we as humans are flawed, and so is AI. We can't necessarily change the training data set. This is probably a session for another time and for a different audience of NLP professionals, but we can think critically and challenge ourselves. Ensure that we are using maybe multiple AI models, so we get different training data sets, different perspectives. We look at employing a different, diverse teams as well. Again, talk to your colleagues. Don't just stay in your own little hole. Talk to people. And of course, think more critically. Always, always challenge yourself. Ask questions for the same topic in different ways. You will see that different results are going to come up. And of course, the most important thing, understand why AI is giving you an answer. How did it come up with that conclusion, that answer to your question? Really understand the why. And so just to sum up, bias exists in both ourselves and AI. We need to acknowledge that. As AI becomes a core part of our day-to-day, we need to be aware of biases and really use our critical thinking. And please feel free to employ structural and analytic techniques and the tips we went through to try and mitigate bias as much as you can. And now that we've gone through these bits and pieces, please think about how bias affects your role, your day-to-day tasks, and please share with us all. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sophia. That was fascinating.
Pleasure.
And for everyone, you probably saw in the footnote, but Sophia has a PhD, so congratulations on that. That's a big. That is a big thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we have some time for some questions, but just to kick off, the question for me is around speed and quality. You mentioned the example, 48 hours, 17,000 pieces. What is the trade-off and where is the balance?
We always try to maintain quality as high as possible. Of course, there are ways to test quality as much as we can. But I think the key point here is that we are bringing AI and humans together. And I think having both of these components work in tandem is very important. Neither of these two elements can operate in isolation. We need to bring them together, and this is when we have the best results.
Right, so use AI for the run-of-the-mill work.
Exactly.
Yep.
Big data set, use AI to do the heavy lifting, but of course, use people to think critically, come up with proper insights, and do the quality work.
That is a great takeaway. Any questions from the audience? Anyone? Maya, yes.
Hey, my friend.
Hello.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
How would you suggest we deal with cognitive bias coming from our clients?
It's a great question. Well, we need to recognize that our clients are humans too. So, of course, they will have cognitive biases as well. One of the main examples I can think of is when clients come to us with, we want every single metric you can imagine for our analysis. Let's put everything in the brief. So there is this cognitive bias, this assumption that the more metrics we include in the analysis, the better the result and the output. But actually, that's not the case. So we, as researchers and analysts, have to try and educate them and show them evidence around, no, you don't need 70 metrics. You actually need 5 metrics, and these are the ones you need based on your objectives and the questions, the strategic questions that you have. So really work with them and be partners to them, educate them, and make them challenge themselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofia. Sofia Tamarello, Senior Consultant at Cometric. Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
I'm sure you can find Sofia in the break session
Grab me,
and later
yeah.
on in the day.